February sky over northern Germany. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler rolled his Messerschmitt into position behind what he thought would be an easy kill. Another American escort fighter limping home. His squadron had been feasting on these vulnerable machines for months, picking them off like wolves hunting wounded deer. But as Stigler closed to firing range, something felt different. This wasn't a P-47 Thunderbolt. It wasn't a P-38 Lightning. This was something new, something sleek and fast. A North American P-51 Mustang. Stigler had heard about these aircraft. Luftwaffe intelligence had dismissed them as average performers. Nothing special, nothing to worry about. His commanders had laughed about them in briefings. The Americans were desperate, they said, throwing anything with wings into the fight. What Stigler didn't know in that moment, what none of German high command had figured out yet, was that he was looking at the aircraft that would systematically destroy German air superiority over the next 15 months. The airplane closing on his tail wasn't just another fighter. It was the beginning of the end. To understand why one aircraft changed everything, you need to understand how badly things were going for the Allies in early 1944. The American strategy was simple on paper. Bomb German factories during the day, destroy their ability to make weapons, win the war. But reality was proving much more complicated. German air defense had become a deadly machine. It worked like this. Radar stations along the coast spotted incoming bombers the moment they crossed into enemy airspace. Controllers tracked their direction and speed. Then, they sent that information to fighter bases across Germany. German pilots would take off, climb to altitude, and wait. They knew exactly where the bombers were heading. They knew exactly when the American escort fighters would have to turn back. And that was the key problem. American fighters like the P-47 Thunderbolt were tough and powerful. They could protect bombers over France and into Western Germany, but they couldn't go any further. Their fuel tanks ran dry. They had to turn around and fly home. The moment those escorts left, German fighters attacked. Picture it, 800 American bombers flying toward Berlin in a long stream stretching across the sky. P-47 seconds, guarding them like sheepdogs protecting a flock. Then the escorts waggle their wings, the signal that they're running low on fuel, and peel away toward England. Now those bombers are alone, and the wolves are waiting. German fighters would swarm in from every direction. Messerschmitt, 109 seconds. Focke-Wulf, 190 seconds. Twin-engine destroyers armed with rockets. The bombers had guns, but they couldn't maneuver. They had to hold formation. They were sitting targets. The numbers were horrifying. In 1 week of October, 1,943, the Americans lost 148 heavy bombers and their crews. That's nearly 1,500 young men killed or captured in 7 days. The bombing campaign was bleeding to death. Something had to change, fast. Here's where the story gets strange. The aircraft that would save the bombing campaign already existed, but almost nobody wanted it. The P-51 Mustang had been designed in 1940. North American Aviation built it in just 117 days, a record that still seems impossible. The British had ordered it because they needed fighters desperately, any fighters. When the first Mustangs arrived in England, test pilots were impressed by how smooth and fast they were at low altitude. The aircraft handled beautifully. It was a joy to fly. But there was a problem. The original P-51 used an American engine called the Allison. This engine worked great near the ground, but as the aircraft climbed higher, the engine grew weaker and weaker. Above 15,000 feet, the Mustang became sluggish. It couldn't keep up with German fighters at the altitudes where bomber battles happened. The British tried using Mustangs for ground attack missions. hit trains, shoot up airfields, stay low where the engine worked. It seemed like a waste of a beautiful airframe, but what else could they do? American military leaders looked at the performance numbers and shrugged. "We have P-47 seconds and P-38 seconds," they said. "We don't need this thing." German intelligence studied the Mustang and wrote it off. Not a threat, just another mediocre American design. Everyone was looking at this aircraft and seeing limitations. Nobody was seeing potential. Nobody except a few engineers who asked a simple question. What if we put a different engine in it? The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine was a British masterpiece. It powered the Spitfire, the most famous fighter of the war. Unlike the Allison, the Merlin had a supercharger that kept it powerful at high altitude. It actually got stronger as it climbed. In 1942, engineers at Rolls-Royce decided to try something. They took a P-51 airframe and replaced the Allison with a Merlin. The results were astonishing. The new aircraft, called the P-51B, was transformed. At 30,000 feet, where bomber battles happened, it was one of the fastest fighters in the world. It could outrun a Messerschmitt 109. It could catch a Focke-Wulf 190. It could dive, climb, and turn with the best German aircraft. But speed wasn't the real miracle. The real miracle was range. See, the Mustang had been designed with a different fuel system than other American fighters. It carried fuel in tanks built into its wings. It was also incredibly efficient. The aircraft slipped through the air with less resistance than bulkier fighters like the P-47. When engineers added the Merlin engine, which was also fuel-efficient, and then hung external drop tanks under the wings, they did some calculations. The numbers seemed impossible. A P-51B Mustang could fly over 1,650 miles on a single mission. That was twice the range of a P-47. It meant a Mustang could take off from England, fly all the way to Berlin, fight German interceptors over the capital, and fly home again. No escort fighter had ever been able to do that. German air defense strategy was built on the assumption that it couldn't be done. The assumption was about to be shattered. The mission was planned for early March 1944. For the first time, American bombers heading to Berlin would have fighter escort the entire way. Some commanders didn't believe it would work. "Fighters can't make it that far," they argued. "The pilots will run out of fuel and crash in the North Sea. This is suicide." The math said otherwise. The pilots said they could do it. The mission was approved. On the morning of the attack, German radar stations lit up as usual. Controllers tracked the bomber stream crossing the coast. They calculated the distance to Berlin. They ordered fighters to prepare. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. The escorts would turn back any minute now. They always did. But the escorts didn't turn back. German controllers stared at their screens in confusion. Those fighter contacts were still there, still moving east, still climbing alongside the bombers. This had to be an error. Equipment malfunction. The fighters couldn't possibly have enough fuel. Then the radio reports started coming in from Luftwaffe pilots over Berlin. American fighters over the capital. Impossible. But there they were. Franz Stigler was one of the German pilots scrambled to meet this impossible threat. When he spotted the sleek new aircraft with the distinctive air scoop under its belly, he thought his experience would carry him through. He had shot down American planes before. This would be no different. He was wrong. The P-51 pilot saw Stigler coming. Instead of trying to run like damaged escorts usually did, the American turned into the attack. The two fighters twisted through the winter sky over Germany. Stigler couldn't shake him. Every move he made, the Mustang matched. When he tried to dive away, the American followed. When he tried to climb, the Mustang stayed on his tail. The aircraft he had dismissed as mediocre was outflying him. He barely escaped with his life. Across the Berlin sky, similar scenes played out. German pilots who had grown confident, almost lazy from months of easy kills, suddenly found themselves in desperate fights for survival. The hunters had become the hunted. When the American bombers turned for home, the Mustangs went with them, all the way back to England. The German fighters couldn't believe what they were seeing. The rules of the air war had just been rewritten. After that first Berlin mission, everything changed. American commanders realized they had a weapon that broke German air defense completely. They ordered Mustang pilots to do something new. "Don't just protect the bombers," they said. "Go hunting." P-51 pilots started sweeping ahead of the bomber streams. They dove on German airfields. They caught enemy fighters while they were still climbing. They chased Luftwaffe aircraft back to their bases and shot them while they tried to land. German pilot losses exploded. In the first 3 months of 1944, the Luftwaffe lost over 1,000 pilots killed. These weren't beginners. Many were experienced aces who had survived years of combat. Men who had shot down dozens of Allied aircraft. Now they were dying faster than Germany could train replacements. The bomber statistics flipped completely. Missions that had once cost dozens of aircraft now came home with minimal losses. Crews who had expected to die started believing they might survive. One number tells the whole story. In August 1943, a bombing raid on German ball-bearing factories lost 60 bombers, 600 men killed or captured in a single mission. By summer 1944, similar raids were losing 5 or 6 bombers. The Mustangs had made the impossible possible. German factories started running out of pilots. Then they started running out of fuel. Then they started running out of everything. The bombing campaign that had been dying was now strangling Germany's war machine. By June 1944, when Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, they looked up and saw something remarkable. The sky was full of American and British aircraft. German planes were almost nowhere to be found. Air superiority, total, complete. Won by fighters that German intelligence had dismissed as not a threat. One engine change transformed an overlooked aircraft into the most important fighter of the war. The P-51 Mustang didn't have the most powerful guns. It wasn't the fastest in a dive. It wasn't the toughest when taking damage. Other aircraft beat it in individual categories. But no other fighter could do everything the Mustang did. Fly far, fight well, come home safe, day after day, mission after mission. By the end of the war, Mustang pilots had destroyed nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft. They had escorted bombers to every corner of Nazi Germany. They had broken the Luftwaffe's back. Franz Stigler survived the war. So did thousands of other German pilots who learned the hard way that the aircraft they had dismissed was actually their doom. Military planners learned a lesson they never forgot. Range matters. The ability to project air power deep into enemy territory changes everything. Modern fighters are still designed with this principle in mind. All because engineers asked a simple question. What if we put a different engine in it? Sometimes the smallest changes produce the biggest results. A new engine in an overlooked airframe, a few hundred extra miles of range, and suddenly the entire war looks different. The skies over Berlin in 1944 proved it.